Watching testimony from Brandon Kamek. He was the man who was hired by Ken Paxton to conduct an investigation. Some question about whether or not he was a special prosecutor, an outside counsel, but anyway, we've been playing that testimony from, I can't remember which day that testimony was, but anyway, from earlier, and when we stop, we'll finish playing it. And that's kind of what our plan is while we do deliberations, is to do a mix of playing old testimony and also talking. So there's a poll in the chat if you'd like to, see how long you think senators will deliberate. And we have Stephanie Alvarado as our legal analyst right now, and Bernadine Steptoe is coming back, our senior political producer, because you weren't on with us this morning. We had Bud Kennedy, and so we haven't gotten your reactions to closings this morning. So what do you think?
Mesmerizing, and I think that I say that in the sense that Busby, on the side of the defense, I think did the job that he was supposed to do, and that's to weave the story of that these were disgruntled employees, that you have some of the House members who hated Paxton, and they came up with the impeachment, and that there's no evidence, and I think he did a good job doing that. But I also think the House, that's the party to the impeachment trial that had the surprise. I think that they did a very good job of highlighting their evidence. And early on, when a number of us were saying that, okay, questioning the strategy of the House, and if you listen to and saw what they did during the closing, they knew exactly what they were doing. And then to have State Representative Leach to end, it was just powerful. And it was just powerful. I think that they did an excellent job both on their closing.
I liked the quote that Representative Leach used at the end from Martin Luther King Jr., and I'm going to read it because I thought it was so powerful. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take the position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but one must take it because one's conscience tells one that is right.
When he started, when he said Martin Luther King, I'm like, because I knew that he was getting ready to quote something that would be not only relevant but powerful. And then I recognized that quote, and I said, how relevant, and how I'm telling you, surprise. They really did surprise me there at the end.
Yeah, I thought their closings were particularly effective. Stephanie?
Yeah. They were very stylistically very, very different, but each effective in their own way. They always tell you in law school when you're a baby lawyer, be yourself. And you don't, when you're a young lawyer, you don't really know what that is. But once you practice a long time, you get to know yourself. You kind of grow into your own. And I think both of these sides, even though their styles are very, very different, they are each effective in their own way. Mr. Busby's very dynamic. He grabs your attention. Mr. Murr, very methodical, very analytical, very black and white, which is what you expect from the prosecution side. It's about right or wrong, no in between, no gray. And of course, Mr. Busby did the thing that every defense lawyer learns to do, which is hold the state to their burden. Hold them to the burden. Don't let them get away with anything. Reiterate the strengths of your side, which for him is that there is nothing. He couldn't say that enough times. There's nothing, and that they should be ashamed. He's telling you that. He's wanting to remind you that the burden of proof is not over here on this side of the table. It's over there on that table. And did they meet it? Not only did they not meet it, but they're wasting, taxpayer time and money, making us come here to have to prove my client's innocence. So, like I said, even though stylistically they're very different, they're both extremely effective. And I don't envy these senators for having to decide which way they're going to come down, because they have constituents to answer to too.
And I think that's what Busby was doing. You know, talking not only to those senators and using those the dog whistles that he's so good at doing, but he was talking to to Paxton supporters as well as holding on to those senators who are already in his corner, and then trying to pull over some who are like, I think that most of them went into this knowing how they were going to vote, but I don't want to believe probably that all of them did. But he was telling them, and Busby's closing was almost 100%, well, let's say 95% political.
Right.
And that's what they were doing. And then the House was probably 90% looking at the evidence, but they also interject the politics of it.
Well, yeah, because you had Leach say, well, I wasn't out with TLR, I wasn't out
Yeah.
with George P. Bush, I wasn't out with
Yeah.
Karl Rove,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, yeah.
And especially when you mentioned that Busby, I'll always remember his name, where he said that you ought to be ashamed, and then you see Jeff Leach come up and say, but how can, almost in tears. So they both did a very good job.
Well, and and because of the way the Senate camera was framed, we couldn't see all of Busby's. He had graphics up. He had the one with Rusty Hardin, and there were some others that we saw on Twitter. One that had a scripture and some various things. So he also had some visual aids that he was using, and then of course we had the. You can see the sign. You can see there's Rusty Hardin, and there were some others. Jay, if you want to look on Twitter, I know there's others out there. Yeah, there's others. He had other visual aids. It's just because of the camera angle that we were using the Senate feed, and that had a tighter shot, and so you couldn't see what was off to his side. But I thought that the prosecution's use of the sound bites was so effective, Stephanie, so effective.
Yes, and since they don't have the benefit of a court reporter or
Well, they had one there.
Well,
it's more effective to have.
It really is. It really is, and I wonder how many lawyers will kind of take their cues from that, and how many lawyers do that. I don't do that personally. I don't like to be at the mercy of technology a lot of times, because as you can see, sometimes it doesn't go right.
Oh,
and
sometimes we don't have our mics on up here,
right,
and
and
all
that
kinds of
breaks
things
your
happen.
rhythm, and it takes away from your message. It makes you look fumbly. So I personally don't do that, but I do not begrudge other lawyers that do. It is very effective. But I agree, you're right, to hear it from the witness's mouth, and that really was following the pattern that Murr was talking about when he says, you're going to get these exhibits. You can take those back with you. Look at them, review them, discuss them if you need to. Recall this testimony. It's because they're not going to have the benefit, I guess, of being able to come back and re-listen to that like they would if it was a regular, state criminal trial or state felony trial. So
It was as if he was issuing them a challenge.
Right.
So you go back and look, and then he didn't take up the time. He didn't take up his hour to go through it, but he issued them the challenge. You go back and look at it.
Right.
And
then some of them might decide they want to see Nate Paul's interviews. There's about 3 hours worth of them.
You know what I know, and during this whole 2 weeks, anybody who's listening to us, they ought to go back and look at those interviews.
And you can find those on the Senate impeachment site if you look on August 15th under Volume 1 on August 15th. That PDF, it's the second and third exhibits if you click on those links. But don't leave our live stream.
Don't leave out. You know what? One of the shots that we had up earlier when they were showing when Busby first started talking, when I was watching that, I wish we could bring that shot back up quickly. Okay, show it where you just barely show him. Because when that first started, I thought they were bringing a picture of former President Trump. And I'm like, well, what does he have? I did, and then when I actually realized who it is, but I thought that, wait, politics. We really are playing politics now. But that was my initial impression.
Because
I just saw a part of it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And that's unusual too, because in a state criminal trial or criminal trial, lawyers are not allowed to attack the parties through their lawyer.
Right.
And I mean, he's just probably going to see how much he can get away with,
I know.
what he can do and pushing the envelope. So
But if some of our, because I saw it on television, and if some of our viewers were watching it, they probably could have thought, because I'm thinking President Trump, boy, he sure is playing the political.
Yeah, so I had promised folks, tons of you emailed me your questions, and I'm going to try to answer as many as I can. And I'm going to give my email again, and I might live to regret that. It's TEISERER@WFAA.com. So we're going to go through them. I'm going back chronologically, and I'm going to work my way through it. So, question is, who and how is it decided that deliberations are over? I went back and looked, and in the rules, and it looks like it's just the senators. It appears. I mean, there's not a whole lot of explanation of the rules, but it would be up to the senators to decide that. Okay, so wait a minute. Jay just texted me.
Hold on to that info.
Okay, I'm holding on to that info. All right. So because he's on the hunt for these trial, these things that Busby showed. I've got him looking. So I don't know exactly. We do know that I believe it's going to be senators, but we know that Dan Patrick said, they deliberate till 8 o'clock tonight, and then they'll resume. And if they don't come to a decision today, then they go tomorrow, and then Sunday, and then if they go into Monday, he's going to sequester them. So I would be shocked to go into Monday. Okay, so somebody asked, does Paxton have to be guilty on all 16 counts of removal, or does one suffice for removal from office? He only has to be found sustained on one of them. If he is sustained on one of them, then he is removed. And then there will be a separate vote to determine whether he would be barred from office. Next question. Does the effect of this impeachment and trial render Paxton unable to pursue further political goals? I'm gonna toss that one to Bernadine because I'm not the political reporter.
Well, you know what? If in the state of Texas, that would be dependent upon the second vote. They have 2 votes today. They have a vote to sustain the charges, which would, if they sustain them, even one, it would remove them. Then they have a second vote, which will prohibit him from ever running in the state of Texas again.
But he could still run for federal office.
He could still run for
He
federal
could still. He
office.
could. And,
He could still run for federal office.
He could still run for federal office. So it would if he was sustained on one, it'd preclude him from Texas office, but not from federal office.
Not from. You're absolutely right. And I was thinking about this because you do have. It's going to be a very difficult vote.
Oh yeah.
But if they wanted to compromise, they could vote to sustain one, which will remove him presently, but then they could not sustain prohibiting him from running again. And that's sort of a compromise vote.
Kind of split the baby.
They
They could do that.
And then that would satisfy some who, and then you know what the narrative could be then? Okay, the critics have said that had the voters known about all of this before he won this last election, he would not have won. Okay, if they don't prohibit him from running for that office again or whatever office, and they vote and put him in, that argument is gone. They don't care what he did. They don't care what he did. That they want him as either
So he
the
could
agent.
so if he was removed, he could theoretically, under that scenario, run in the special election.
Yeah.
If there was a special election.
Unless they put some restrictions on it, but that's not in the rules. But unless they put some kind of restriction on it, if they don't vote to sustain that second vote,
Right.
then he could run again.
That's,
And that's a compromise vote.
stranger things have been known to happen. So somebody asked, is it likely that further explanation of no testimony by the alleged mistress of Paxton in front of the Senate jurors will be provided formally or informally in the future? I suspect we're not going to hear anything formal, but I suspect there will be a lot of reporters who are based out of Austin that will be trying to figure that out. I mean, the word on the street was this was a Fifth Amendment issue, but it was never said one way or the other. Stephanie, in your experience, so what Patrick came out and said was she was present but unavailable to testify. In your educated assessment, what does that probably mean?
That probably means that she was going to invoke her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination.
Oh, why not just call her anyway?
Well, because that can cut both ways. I mean, technically, you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to do that because essentially you're using that person's assertion of their right against them, which is, that's wholly against what the rights are for anyway, to protect the individual citizen. So you don't do it for that reason. You don't want to open her up to any of that. So that's.
And is there an ethical obligation not to put somebody on the stand that you think would claim the Fifth?
Yes, there's an ethical obligation also. So you don't want to get into that murky territory either.
You don't really want the bar complaint.
That would probably not be good.
Okay.
Well, this is my question then, because, apparently she was going to provoke the Fifth on her entire testimony.
We think. We don't know.
Well,
Yeah,
I know
we're
that's
speculating,
What, you prefaced it with on the street. But also, and then another explanation, an additional explanation, was that since she was going to provoke the Fifth, so they would not be able to get any kind of substantial testimony from her anyway, why subject Senator Angela Paxton to her presence? And the other senators, which I thought, remember, I never thought she'd hit that stand. I never thought that we would see her on that stand because of the political risk. But okay, here's my question. Okay, unless she said that, according to what's on the street, unless she was going to provoke the entire testimony, could she have? Because I watch a lot of Perry Mason and Matlock. So could
You
they
watch Matlock too?
Oh my goodness, I take Matlock. Could they have put her on the stand and let her say from the stand that I provoked my Fifth, instead of doing it the way that they did it?
Yes, you can always do that, and then on TV and on the movies they do it like that. But ethically, no. If you know that that's going to happen, you don't put the witness in that position.
Oh, okay. That's good news.
Well, luckily I've never had a reason to have to take the Fifth. Okay, so let's see. Here's the next question. Senator Paxton doesn't get a vote, but does she get to participate in the deliberations? No, not as far. I reread the rules, and I don't think she would, because she's got a conflict of interest, so it wouldn't make sense. She's not a juror. She's counted basically as present in terms of the vote totals. In other words, which is why you have to have the numbers that you have to have, the 21, but not for the purposes of deliberations. All right, so next one. Okay, so somebody's asking, okay, so yesterday there was an email exchange that, email document evidence during, I think it was the last witness that it was Dutko was trying to get in. It was an email exchange with, it was Dorfman was on the stand, the guy that's like the deputy first assistant, and there was some kind of email exchange. They wanted to get in, and it seemed like they wanted to get it in to impeach him on something he had said, and no, they did not get it in. I do not know what that email exchange was. It seemed like, just based on the context, that it had something to do with settlement negotiations, but they never got it in, and I very much wanted to know what that was, but I do not know at this point what it was. Okay, so I'm going to keep going through these questions. It's a kind of a political question, so I'm going to let you answer it, Bernadine. So this person's questions regarding the verdict. Throughout the week, y'all have been often pondered, will the jurors make their decision based on the law or politics? My question is this: if the senators allow politics to overrule the rule of law and they acquit Paxton because of politics, what happens to the rule of law in Texas?
I want to immediately say no, but obviously it's going to be a political decision among some of them. But as far as the rule of law, it doesn't change the rule of law. But you know what, and you can help me with this, but the rule of law is primarily on interpretation and or whatever. I know it's strictly, but in terms of politics, this is politics.
This has always been a political proceeding.
Yeah, it's political. So I would say that politically it's going to have a lot of ramifications. and discussions and whatever. But in terms of the actual law, I wouldn't think so. No.
I don't think so either. I mean, it's just like any other typical criminal trial, any other kind of trial. You can always ask for jury nullification. I mean, there's parameters around doing that, but jurors do that all the time. Jurors, being they're supposed to, and they're charged. In the jury charge, they're told that they are the arbiters of the facts. Arbiters of the facts, and they are supposed to apply the law as it is written to the facts, but sometimes they don't do that.
Yeah.
And once they do that, you can't really invade the province of the jury. That's the way our system is set up. So I don't think that this case is going to be the death knell for the rule of law in Texas. But yes, it's definitely politics. And it's definitely going to be what prevails.
A number of Paxton supporters have already said that they're going to primary those who vote to sustain the orders, that there would be some significant ramifications behind how they vote.
Well, which is going to segue into the next question. This person says, I heard Bud Kennedy say the Texas Republican Party is divided into 5 factions. What are those factions? And so Bud gave me the answer, because I definitely don't know the answer to this. Okay, the 5 factions, according to Bud Kennedy, are Trump Christians. They believe in Christian rule. The second one is faith and values Christians. They believe in electing Christians who model good witness. He's got much better handwriting than mine. Trump Patriots, that's the militias, gun groups, something rights. And then probably gun rights. I don't know, some kind of rights. Business Republicans and defense Republicans. So that, according to Bud, is his assessment of the 5 factions of the Republican Party. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to keep going through these questions. Somebody says, I'm aware a lot of this is politics. However, isn't it against their duties to ignore evidence? Well, the reality is this is politics. I mean, this is not your typical. It's not a criminal trial. It's not a civil trial. It is what it is.
Well, and then too, obviously, we have to trust the reason that they give us for reaching their decision. But if you look at the charge that Patrick told them, look at the evidence, look at what you have, and not to base on your personal and all of that. But I don't think that anybody believes that that's going to happen.
Well, I live in the real world, so Okay, so Jay is going to play a story that explains articles of impeachment and how this works. I think because that'll help answer some of the questions you guys have out there.
The Texas House of Representatives charged Ken Paxton with 20 offenses. Each one of these is called an article of impeachment. It's now up, though, to the Texas Senate to try Paxton on these allegations. Senators immediately set aside 4 of the charges, and we'll get to those here in just a moment. It might be easiest, though, to put these charges into 4 buckets, maybe. The first 5 involve a real estate developer in Austin named Nate Paul. He was a friend and financial donor to Ken Paxton. Well, the first charge here accuses Paxton of improperly getting the state involved in a private lawsuit that Nate Paul had with a charity, when prosecutors say it had nothing to do with the taxpayers of Texas. Paxton is also accused of issuing official legal rulings to prevent the foreclosure of some of Nate Paul's properties, and then blocking public information requests, protecting Nate Paul's records in the Texas Department of Public Safety. Article 4 of the impeachment says that Paxton misused official information, giving Nate Paul government documents that had not been made public. And the last one here in this set says Paxton misused his power by appointing a private attorney as special prosecutor to investigate things for Nate Paul. Now the second set, Articles 6 through 10. Paxton's top staff, his own deputies that he handpicked, they finally blew the whistle on him. They reported Paxton for accepting bribes and tampering with government documents to help Nate Paul. Another of the impeachment articles is for Paxton, though, retaliating against those whistleblowers and firing them all. Then, to clear his own name, House investigators say Paxton conducted a bogus investigation into those complaints from the whistleblowers and then published a report with false information in it. Paxton then tried to privately settle the whistleblower lawsuit and asked state lawmakers to pay $3.3 million of taxpayer funds to pay off his former deputies. Article 9 here alleges bribery. Prosecutors say that Paxton gave Nate Paul favorable treatment as Attorney General when Paul hired the woman with whom Paxton was having an extramarital affair. Prosecutors say Paxton took another bribe from Nate Paul, letting Paul renovate Paxton's home in exchange for more special access to the Attorney General's office. So that's the first half. The next 4 articles here, 11, 12, 13, and 14, these were the ones all set aside by the state Senate. These 4 are related to Paxton's criminal charges for securities fraud that go back to 2008. Now the final group here, Articles 15 through 20. These are broader. Article 15 says Paxton lied in his office's report about the whistleblower allegations. The next one alleges conspiracy, that Paxton worked with others to commit these acts. Prosecutors say Paxton also, quote, misused his official powers by having state employees do things that benefited Paxton personally. This one says Paxton violated the state constitution and his oath of office. Article 19 here says Paxton is unfit for public office. And then the last one accuses Paxton of bringing scandal to the state government. Paxton says all these allegations will be easily disproven. That's what the impeachment trial is now for in the state Senate. Keep in mind, this is not a legal trial, it's a political one. If state senators find Paxton guilty, he will be removed from office. If they acquit Paxton, he will return to work as Texas Attorney General. I'm Jason Whiteley.
Okay, so this is a graphic that shows a criminal versus a political trial. Obviously, the court, the Texas Senate, the judge, the presiding officer, of course, in this case it was Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, the jury being the members of the Texas Senate, and the prosecutors, the House Board of Managers, and that's what we've seen play out over the last 2 weeks. Okay, so I'm going to keep working my way through these questions because I promised folks that we would answer them, or we would try the best we can. So Bernadine, I'm going to go to you. And I don't know, Stephanie, you can try this one too. If General Paxton is acquitted, will the actions that he took be legal and ethical for future AGs and politicians in Texas? What kind of message does it send? I think that's basically what the person's asking.
Well, the only reason I'm struggling is because until we do get some kind of decision, then it depends on which side. See, remember the defense is saying he did nothing wrong.
Right.
But the House is saying he did a lot wrong. So I think until a decision is made or is flushed out, you can't say, well, we can say because they brought up a lot of policies, but that's what the whole trial is about. Yeah. Whether or not he did something wrong, incorrectly, or it was just part of his job.
Stephanie?
Well, I think you don't want to. I don't think you want to set the bar according to this trial and to the things that have gone on along here. There are a lot of ethical ramifications. I mean, nobody is really talking about, because it's not an issue, the ethical ramifications. I mean, at the end of the day, he's still a lawyer and he still has ethical duties and obligations that he has to abide by as a licensed lawyer in the state of Texas, which is why those whistleblowers did what they did. I mean, we've talked about this, Tanya, you and I. I cannot imagine being a young lawyer, starting your career, going to the AG's office, thinking this is the career path. For me, I want to be, whether you decide you want to be a lifelong government employee or if it's a stepping stone to another government job, having the courage and the will, sticking your neck out to not only go against your boss, but to accuse them of a crime. I don't think that we want to set the bar here, and I don't think that anybody is saying that, and I really don't think I think that's a little overreach by saying that if he is found not sustained, that is a stamp on saying that everything he did was okay, because that happens all the time in criminal trials too. I'll often go back and talk to jurors and ask them, what did you base your decision on? And a lot of times they will say, I don't believe that he or she didn't do XYZ. I just don't think that the state proved it. That's different. So I don't think if these articles are not sustained, I don't think that means that he is not without some wrongdoing and that he won't be held accountable in some venue or some realm. He's still going to have to contend with possible criminal, prosecution, possible if the bar may still look at him for ethical violations. I mean, he's not going to be completely out of the woods. So it's by no means a go by for anybody.
Well, and I will, whether he's removed or not, that's the purview of the Senate. But as someone who has covered the criminal justice system for 30 years and who did stories that a former Democratic DA probably wasn't very happy with, that exposed his misuse of forfeiture funds, I think that we should hold our public officials to a higher standard. And I believe that. And part of my thought process in terms of the way I do my job is holding people accountable. Kind of the old saying, comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comforted, bringing things into the light. I know they all sound kind of hokey when I say it out loud, but I really do believe that. And the things that we heard described here, we cannot pretend that they were okay. It's not okay. Whether you should be removed or not, that's a different matter. That's not for me to say. But I have talked to many, many attorneys, and not an attorney that I know who has said that the things that were described in terms of the hiring of Mr. Kamek, and in terms of even the way the open records situation was handled. I've filed thousands of open records requests in my career, and I know how they're handled, and I know how the things I've dealt with, and mine have not been handled that way. So, we just we should hold our public officials to a higher level of accountability, and I think that's regardless of political party, and that's just where I stand on it. But in terms of what should or shouldn't happen to him, that's not for me to say, and that's for these Senate jurors to decide. Okay.
But let me just weigh in just quickly.
Okay.
Because everything that you've said, I'm sure a number of people feel the same way, especially in terms of the law part. But keep in mind now. And I sort of answer from a political perspective, because if he runs again, if they don't sustain and he runs again and he wins, then his voters, which probably will be a great majority of our Texans, they're going to say what he did. While I might not agree with it, I accept it. Now, whether I totally agree that it shouldn't be that type of behavior, definitely, especially from a attorney general. Yeah. It shouldn't be acceptable.
You run the state's law firm.
But
and we should have
if he gets in that office again, then it does raise the question whether or not his voters viewed it, and then if he wins, it's the majority of the voters view it as something that they don't want to hold him accountable for.
So Jay just walked up and handed me, so far we've had a little over 1,300 people voting, and how long senators will deliberate. 48% say until 4 p.m. or earlier, 28% say until 8 p.m., so clearly a clear majority think this is going to end today. Until Saturday, 14%. Until Sunday, 10%. I'm in the probably in the until 8 camp. I mean, I would say I'm in that camp. I say that just because, yeah, I just feel like it'll well, it may not go till 8, but I think it's going to go later than 4. That's just complete speculation and conjecture based upon. But I'm always wrong about deliberations. So I mean, I've this is not the same as a criminal trial, but anytime I think I know on a deliberation, I never do. So, but it just feels like that these senators are going to want to get home, and I bet if we had access to their travel itineraries, we'd have a much better sense.
Why is that private? why we don't have that information.
We'll talk about her in a minute. Jay's talking in my ear. We'll go back there in a minute. But let me keep going through these questions. I promised folks, Jay, that I'm going to work through these questions. Okay. So somebody asked, have we heard anything from Dick DeGuerin, and if not, why? Dick DeGuerin questioned a couple witnesses, but he didn't do any of the openings or the closings. They obviously, with the openings and closings, they let the House members do that, but he did do a couple of the witnesses. Do you think if Paxton cannot serve in Texas, will Trump ask him to serve if he is elected? You see Trump bring it. So if Trump were to get reelected, this is what this person's asking. If Trump were to get reelected, would he bring Paxton to Washington?
Absolutely, if it helps him. If it helps him, because if you look at some of the things that Trump has been accused of, he's been impeached twice, has never had it sustained, then a lot of those things are what Paxton's doing. But I say that it depends upon whether or not it fits within former president's idea of what he wants, because he's still strongly behind Paxton. He's still strong. So I think he would, if only if, because he would carry baggage to anyone else. But he's very popular among Trump supporters. Now, he would never have a peaceful day in his life.
Right.
But you know, that's not how Trump makes decisions.
Oh my, this person sends a lot of questions. Let me see if I can. This person's asking, okay. Sorry, it's really long. So this person's asking about if we think that the FBI or the DOJ will be indicting for a conspiracy. Well, obviously we have no idea on that. Nate Paul is under indictment right now, and what we do know is that from testimony is that there is an ongoing federal grand jury investigation, but in terms of what could or might happen, we have absolutely no idea what might be happening on that. So let me kind of go on to some of the others. That one's sorry guys, I'm trying to go through these in order. Let me bring this up as I kind of work my way through these questions. So, what did you think about Stephanie? About a little bit more about, you know, Laura. How much of a problem do you think it was that we didn't hear from Laura Olson? I mean, were you surprised about that?
No, I mean, all of those things are to use Busby's analogy that he used in his closing, the three buckets. Of the three buckets, you know, that really wasn't that. I mean, that wasn't the most egregious. I mean, morally, do people disapprove of it? Yes. Is it salacious? Would it have been juicy to hear all of that stuff? Would we have been? Yes. From a trial standpoint or a criminal trial standpoint, I really don't think it's that big of a loss. I think we're just, you know, human natures. We're nosy, and we wanted to hear something juicy.
Well, I would have wanted to know. So, how did you come to know Nate Paul? Who told you about the job?
Exactly,
Who told you about the job?
That's exactly why it didn't happen.
Yeah, I take the
But those would be the questions I have.
Right.
Those would be the things I'd want to know.
Exactly what.
How did you come to get this job?
Right, and who's to
how'd
say
you find out about it? Was it posted?
Who's to say that those questions won't be asked of her someday? Like I said, in
we don't know if they have them
in another realm, you know,
don't know.
whether it be by a deposition or an interview. Maybe she gives a big Oprah-like interview. I mean, we don't know. We
know Tucker's doing interviews.
Could be.
That's her.
That's good speculation too.
Not of her.
Yeah, because what I'm referring to, folks, for you guys that don't know, is that Ken Paxton tweeted out, I don't know, was it yesterday, the day before, that he was going to go do an interview in Maine with Tucker Carlson. So here's another question. Since Brandon Kammack was not paid for the services he provided to A.G. Paxton, Could he file a criminal charge of theft of service against the AG, or could it be more of a civil lawsuit to get the money that he's owed? Now, bear in mind, this is now 3 years. Even if, I don't know that you could file criminally, and probably not.
Well, depending on what he puts the value of his services
He
at.
said he was owed $14,000.
Well, that's a felony amount, so he has 5 years to file something like that. If he were, I don't see him doing. I don't know why anybody would want to serve themselves up to be scrutinized, whether it be from the prosecutorial end of things or from, I don't know where he's working now, what he's doing now.
He probably just would like to put this behind him.
Exactly.
Well-
I'm sure he just would prefer to go back to being just a plain citizen and anonymous. I don't know why he would want to do that and subject himself to that.
But that
scrutiny.
became obvious during his testimony. I just want to go away.
Yeah.
I want to go on my
Yeah.
honeymoon. I want to just.
Yeah, I want to be done with this, and I think that was the sense I got from him. I got the sense that the last place that he wanted to be was testifying before the Texas
Back
Senate.
in court.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's a question. I think this is a Stephanie question. When Rusty Hardin rested, could he have withdrawn his rest since he mistakenly rested?
Okay, now Deandra talked a little bit about that yesterday. So when you do that in criminal trials in state court, the state, that's who he's representing, you have the absolute right to reopen if something has. This is not a criminal trial. They are not adhering by black letter procedural rules. Although Justice Landemeyer is the perfect person to have as your spotter,
Right.
as your judge spotter. I can think of nobody who would be better. I practiced in front of her. Several of us in Dallas have. She is above reproach. She is a rule follower. She is to the T, very extremely thorough. Even before she went even before she got to the high court, she was very much a by the book judge. So. Yeah, they would have in state court. The answer is I don't know, because I don't know what procedural rules they're using here. But I do know in state court, the state does have the absolute right to reopen.
Can they reject it?
No. In fact, it's a reversible error in state court if you don't
Right,
let
but
the state
obviously
reopen.
there's no reversible
That's
error
why
in
I'm saying.
impeachment court.
That's why I'm saying it's different. We're in a different realm. So I really don't know.
Yeah.
And could the fact that Busby saying I don't intend to cross him anyway at this point have played into that?
It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he didn't call him back up.
No,
I mean,
he said
Brickman-
yeah.
I think Brickman was what we're talking about is Blake Brickman. He was the last prosecution witness. And he was a pretty effective witness.
sure was.
And, but he was clearly very angry at what had happened to him, but I found him to be pretty effective. Okay, so someone's asking again, did Dan Patrick say whether Angela Paxton could be present during the deliberations? My understanding is she will not be present. She shouldn't be present because she's not a juror. She had to be present for the purposes of because all the senators have to be present per the Constitution. And this person's also telling me to tell my sweet son, thank you for sharing his mom. So I appreciate that. He has been, I am very blessed to have an 11-year-old son who is he's just a really good kid. He makes my life easier in times like this. Although he's a typical kid. He throws stuff on the floor. Can't seem to find the trash can. Like most males. Anyway, so let's go on to the next question. Does the panel feel like there will be fallout at the AG's office no matter the outcome? I don't know.
I mean,
It seems like the fallout happened 3 years ago.
I was going to say, I can't imagine what the morale there has been.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about walking on eggshells. I just can't even imagine, if he's going to come back and resume work as Mr. Busby said he's prepared to do. That'd be a very tense workplace to go back to.
Yeah, but I think that in terms of the fallout, 3 years ago, all the people that were, that had an issue with the way he was
Are
running
gone.
it, they're gone. And so the people that he's got surrounding him now are
Loyalists,
okay with,
probably
they're okay
loyalists.
with the way things are, are being
Excuse
done.
me.
So somebody's asking, how would we vote? Well, I I definitely am not going to comment on how I would vote one way or the other. That is not for me to say. That is up to the Senate jurors. Let's see. And I know Bernadine's not going to do
Oh,
it
I
either.
have no intentions.
No.
Nor do I.
Because I can't vote anyway.
No, and it's pointless. And
Yeah,
and so
and then I
that's
would. Oh no.
nope. So okay, I'm going to read this out loud, and I think it's going to be a question that Stephanie's going to have the answer to. The defense attorney made a big point of explaining how investigating the validity of search warrants was the bread and butter of being a defense attorney. Using this logic, he questions why it was illegal for Paxton to ask to investigate the search warrant against Nate Paul. My question to you is this. If it is so common for defense attorneys to investigate the validity of search warrants, why was this not done by Nate Paul's attorney? Why was it necessary for Ken Paxton to hire an outside counsel to do this very basic and common task for all defense attorneys?
Well, if Nate Paul's attorney were to do it, he would have to do it in some kind of litigation aspect, and he would have no way to do that. They were asking Paxton to do it because he is a law enforcement official. He has the connections. He would have the ability to approach anything he uncovered as a law
But
enforcement
he wouldn't have
officer.
the ability to get a sealed search warrant.
Well, no, he wouldn't. But he would be able to use his connections, which is what he's essentially getting in trouble for. To ask a private attorney to do that, if there's no pending case, a private attorney doesn't have the right to have the state turn that stuff over to him or her.
Right.
In fact, a lot of people don't understand that we as attorneys, we don't get access to our clients' what they call discovery or criminal offense reports or statements or anything like that until there is a critical step in the prosecution, whether it be indictment or arrest. So if none of that is going on, if you're wondering if your client is being investigated for a crime, you are essentially at the mercy of the police department or the DA's office. And you're right, it's a phone call, and they are under no obligation, no legal obligation at that stage of the process to share that information with you. So yes, we do get to pick apart warrants and so forth, but it has to be at a certain stage in the prosecution process.
Right, and at that point, you know, he had not been charged
Right.
or indicted with a crime. And Brandon Kamek had not been appointed as a special prosecutor. He was not an attorney pro tem. He had not been appointed by the DA. He had no right to seek grand jury subpoenas, right? I mean, you've been a
Correct.
special prosecutor.
Correct.
So, you know, and then there was just so many irregularities about the way that was done. How many times have you been a special prosecutor?
I've been a special prosecutor once, I believe, here in Dallas.
And would you typically
County?
Would you typically pick a person with more or less experience?
More,
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
And the thing is again, he wasn't a special prosecutor, even though he was billing himself as one.
Yeah.
It seemed like he didn't really totally even understand what a special prosecutor is.
And that very well could be. I mean, he was a young lawyer. That could very well be.
He certainly didn't. I mean, he had to consult. He was consulting with Michael Wynn on how to do a subpoena. So there's just a lot of issues there. Okay, so here's the next question. Understanding the Senate's vote on the impeachment articles will not result in a criminal finding of anything, if an article is sustained and that article, as worded, might constitute criminal activity, what are the chances Paxton will be investigated by a prosecutor for such potential criminal activity such as bribery or abuse or misuse of office or the like? Well, my understanding is there is a federal criminal investigation into all this. There's been reporting on that, and we actually had testimony from Missy Carey talking about being called before a federal grand jury. So there is definitely a criminal investigation. Oh, somebody's emailing saying they're watching from Missouri. By the way, I have relatives in Missouri. That's where my mom and dad live. I grew up in the Houston area, but I have relatives. Most of my immediate family lives in Missouri. So let's see. Let's keep going here. Okay. Oh, okay. So that's the tweet. Jay has put up the Paxton tweet that shows he's going to go sit down with Tucker Carlson. Do you still have the Donald Trump tweet?
Yeah, give me like 5 seconds.
Now he's gonna, give Jay 5 seconds. He's our Eric and Stacy, so he's on the hunt for it. Okay, so here's another question. There are currently 16 articles on the for 4 withheld. If the Senate votes no to charges on 16 current, what about those 4? I don't know. I mean, they held those in abeyance, so I guess they could bring them up later. They could decide to throw them out. I think we don't really know the answer to what is going to happen with that. Okay, there it is. That is the tweet from that former President Trump sent out in supporting Ken Paxton earlier this week. And so we've seen a lot of activity and support from him from that faction of the party, and from I think the head of the Republican Party also sent something out a couple days ago. I'm not going to read that question out loud. Somebody was asking about sexual allegations involving somebody else, and I'm not touching that one. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Here's a question. So the House voted to impeach Attorney General Paxton with a 121 to 23 vote. I'd have to go back and look to see if that's an accurate vote. But 60 of the votes in favor came from Republicans. That sounds about right. 23 Republicans were against. This is really a question for Bernadine. How significant do you think this will play with the senators? What he means is that in terms of the overwhelming number of Republicans in the House voted to impeach.
I don't think it'll play a lot, because they're going to decide, number one, whether or not they believe it, and their own constituents. I don't think that carries any kind of bearing on the senators in terms of how they will vote.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree with. I think they're going to make their own decisions, and it'll be interesting. Maybe we'll know this. Did some of them change their mind? Did they come in one way and they went the other way? I don't know. Or did they all just come in the way they were? And it'd be interesting to know at some point how many of them actually had an open mind.
I think
one way or
we
the
will. Now, keep in mind that they won't necessarily comment on it until it has to be in writing. And they have a certain deadline as to when they should submit it. Unless they do some interviews or somewhat, we really won't know.
Okay, so do you want to put it up? Yeah, Jay is pulling something up for me. He just sent me something that Ken Paxton, you said he retweeted it, Jay? Is that what you're saying? Okay, we'll take
Today?
a listen. Yeah, so he tweeted this today. He retweeted it. It's a short clip from Busby's closing, so we're going to bring it up. Okay. Okay, this is a question related to Brent Webster and Ken Paxton taking Brandon Kammack to the Starbucks. And sorry, that whole scene still plays in my head. And I guess this will be a question for you, Stephanie. What might the legal problems be in firing a contract employee prior to the completion of a contract and claiming lack of completion to that contract as a rationale for non-payment? Is this not proof that Ken Paxton was acting in bad faith relative to the contract with Mr. Kammack? Would it not be problematic for an attorney general to act in bad faith while soliciting legal contracts on behalf of the state, keeping in mind the best interests of the people of Texas?
Well, that is all outside of my
You're a criminal
legal
attorney.
realm. Yes.
It's way outside
and it
of
would
mine.
be very irresponsible of me to answer
That's contract law
a
stuff.
legal question. Yeah, well, employment law, a legal question that I have
Employment, yeah.
no experience with.
Yeah, so we don't know. Maybe there's some contract lawyers out there watching.
Yeah, or
that y'all
employment lawyers.
Employment
Yeah.
lawyers. Well, we did have
Type
some
in.
employment lawyers that were emailing yesterday because I don't know the answer to that one. I mean, it can't be good, but it because you had Kammack say they took me to the Starbucks. They told me you're done, and we're not paying you the $14,000. That's what Brent Webster said. You need to eat it. But then we had testimony from, can't remember which one of the guys it was yesterday, but from one of those AG's people that spoke yesterday, testifying that if he just given us a report, we would have paid him. So,
After they had told them that they didn't pay.
Well, and as Deandra said, it's like well, why would you keep working on like why would you keep working when you haven't been paid for it?
you've
Right.
already
How does
been
it get to
told.
$14,000?
Yes.
Yeah. So so yeah, it was interesting. Oh, okay. So somebody's asking about open records. They say you mentioned earlier that you're going to use the Nate Paul treatment on the Open Records Act since this trial won't set any precedent for case law. How will you get the records you asked for? I guess what I'm saying is that we heard from the head of the Open Records Division in terms of how they handle these things. If a law, they testified that if a law enforcement agency busts the deadline on requesting discretionary exemptions like the law enforcement exception, that it's presumed public and they're going to release it. Now I know that is not the way they've handled my requests in the past, but I know for a fact, because I have some very good friends who also work for large media outlets, that they were also like me paying very close attention to that testimony and have sent that on to their lawyers, because we're all going to be going, okay, in this because we now have testimony from the AG's office saying this is how we handle requests. This is what we do. And it wouldn't surprise me to see situations play out where, this testimony and description of how open records are handled. And it's not just us that files open records requests. You file open records requests.
We file them from the police department, the different laboratories, criminal labs that handle things. Absolutely.
And what normally happens when they miss a deadline on a criminal exception?
Well,
do you get the
not
records?
much.
I know.
Do you get the records?
No, a lot of
so
times
you don't
no.
get the
And
name file?
but
You
if
get the
you
name-
don't, that's fertile ground for cross-examination, and that's something that you.
Right, but I'm
you
just
know-
saying now the AG's office
Well,
has
yeah.
they've said if you bust the deadline, if you as a police agency miss the deadline on the law enforcement exception or these discretionary exceptions, we're going to release it. Okay. I think they've set some precedent here. They
Well, they just-
testified to this in open court.
Well, they also quoted policy. So the question is whether or not they're adhering to their own policy.
you don't get to pick and choose.
Absolutely.
how you
but
set-
he was just quoting policy,
Yeah, well, I don't
which
know.
is not they don't do it in practice
Well,
apparently.
I mean,
according to.
not in practice for me. I mean,
Yeah.
and other people I know
Not
that
for us
that
either.
I don't know of anybody that has been on the receiving end of such a. Because in my experience and the experience of others I know who regularly use the open records process, whenever a police agency misses that deadline on claiming the law enforcement exception, they'll write a letter, and I could probably dig around in my records and find one where they'll say, yeah, we missed the deadline, but it's still in the public interest, blah 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 blah. I've seen the Dallas Police Department's form letter, and I still don't get it. So this idea that you missed this procedural deadline and we're going to release it, no, that's not the way it works. So. And I feel comfortable speaking to that because I can speak to it from personal experience, and so can you. And so most defense attorneys I know can speak to that. So, okay. So somebody's talking about the Bush family. Well, maybe this is a perfect segue into this clip. Actually, this next question. Do you have the thing loaded up yet, Jay? Jay's working on it, guys. He's out there working for me. All right, this is for you because this is political, Bernadine.
I know.
This is like stump Bernadine time. We already stumped her with the contract question.
Well,
let's stump Bernadine.
Okay.
So the Bush family is painted in testimony as rhino. There's a lot of MAGA noise suggesting those senators voting to suspend General Paxton will be primaried. Please discuss this. Okay. I'm reading here, guys. These are not my questions. These are people that have emailed me. If suspended, will Donald Trump choose Ken Paxton to be his running mate?
Read that part again.
So,
Ken Paxton, would he choose?
So basically, they wanted to discuss two things. They want you to discuss primarying of senators that vote to get rid of Paxton, and will Donald Trump pick Ken Paxton to be his running mate? What's the chances of that?
Well, I think I'll go back to, you had a similar question in terms of President Trump bringing him into his administration, but I don't think that he would choose him as a running mate. He has too much baggage. Okay, and then secondly, when they mentioned the Bush family, by today's standards, they would be considered rhinos, because they were not as ultra conservative as most of your grassroots or your primary voters are today. But when I was listening to Busby say that, I'm like, I don't know a lot of, while you do have a lot of the grassroots, and keep in mind he was talking not only to those senators, but to the grassroots as well, who do think that the Bushes are past their prime. But I kept thinking, but they don't hate them. You know, they have a lot of respect for Bushes. It's just that they're not part of the political narrative and the political regime now.
You got that ready for us now, Jay? We've put the perfect segue for it.
A minute and 21 seconds.
All right, he's still loading it up. Technology, the bane of our existence. It takes a little bit of time to load, because what it is there's a tweet that Paxton sent out, and he grabbed a little bit of Busby's. Well, no, he didn't send the tweet out. There was a tweet that went out, and Paxton tweeted it out, and it's a little clip from Busby's closing. So that's what we're trying to load up into the. I know somebody's telling me to tell Eric to rush that video. I'm trying, guys. I mean, it's like technology.
I really would like to see that before I comment, because it reminds me, well, maybe I need to see it, but it reminds me of when the House was discussing impeachment, and Ken Paxton was calling into those House representatives, threatening and talking, and
Do you think that worked against him?
absolutely. Well, they said they were offended. They were offended that he was actually calling them, trying to put pressure on them as to how they voted. And then let's look at, really, I'm glad you brought this tweet up, because it would make me wonder if how active he is while they're going through this decision of whether or not he leaves the. Eric.
We're waiting on Eric. Jay, our personal Eric
'Cause
over
I'd
here,
like
who's
to know
working on.
just-
He's working on it. Before this is all over with, I feel like you'll have to meet Jay, because he's been wonderful. He is behind the scenes making sure everything. He's loading up the videos and loading up graphics and doing all kinds of stuff for us, because he's the one that's over there making us look smart.
And then like Eric was with the House.
Eric was the defense.
Yeah,
well,
that's
Eric
why-
is the defense side. Stacy is the prosecution.
Yeah, that's
So
why I said, because everybody knew his name by the time the trial was over.
Well, there was like a GoFundMe started.
Yeah, and then everybody
kinda
will know
comical.
Jay by the time.
Okay, you got it? Okay.
Oh, I'm
All right,
very
he's got
anxious,
it.
Yeah.
Do you have an earpiece? Okay, so I can talk over it? Oh, okay. So, there's no audio. This is what he's grabbed is the whole thing where Busby had talked about the Bush regime. Let's see. I have to go back in my notes to find out exactly what Busby said about the Bush regime. He said, I'm digging back in my notes.
He said it's the end of the
The end of the era,
the end
that
of the
kind of
Bush
thing.
era, yeah.
I'm digging around. Yeah, he basically said, this is the end of the era. Oh, okay, here we go. The Bush era in Texas
ended.
ends today. That's
Yeah.
what Busby said. And he's also said he beat the latest in line for the Bushes, referring to George P. Bush.
Yeah, so I guess he's implying that those who impeached him preferred the Bush.
Right.
So now he's saying, hey, if you don't sustain these, then that Bush it's over. The voters have spoken. Okay, now I understand.
Okay, but that's what he retweeted. So.
Yeah.
Okay, or re-exed, or I can't even begin to remember exactly what the terminology is these days. I know it's not technically Twitter anymore, but
X.
X, whatever. If Ken Paxton, here's the next question: if Ken Paxton is acquitted, could the FBI investigation of Paxton use the information presented by the House to indict Paxton? Well, whether or not they'll indict him, I don't know. But I will say this. They will absolutely be combing through every single word and parsing through it, because, wouldn't you say that, Stephanie?
Oh yeah, definitely. Any kind of they've started their impeachment file. I'm probably sure they've been working on that for a while. But yeah, they definitely have some more stuff to add from this proceeding?
So, I'm going to read this one to you because I don't know how to answer it. You're the political person. One Texas senator represents approximately 920,000 Texans. If 10 senators vote not to impeach, they'll be representative of approximately 9.2 million Texans out of 29 million. Does the panel feel this is a representation or misrepresentation of the people?
Well, that's assuming that all those people are in favor of sustaining or not sustaining. I think that I know that the defense regularly said that if you sustain the orders that you're going against the voters of those 3 million who voted for him, but I couldn't say that everybody in that number supports sustaining or not.
Yeah, I mean, each, this is a process laid out in the Constitution, so they're following the Constitution at this point.
Yeah, and then there's no way of knowing that.
So somebody asked about the motion to combine the impeachment action with the action of barring from taking office. My understanding is what Bud said earlier, they withdrew that. So
They withdrew it, but you know what, I was talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
Because it was very interesting that according to the prosecution, in the Constitution, they're not separated. But the House, the Senate decided to separate them. And I was looking at that as perhaps that could be a compromise, a vehicle, because they could vote, the senators could vote to sustain,
Right.
but not vote to sustain that he couldn't run again. So conceivably, he could get removed now, but still run for another office, or even run for AG.
Yep. Okay. Whew. Folks out there are asking lots of questions. And if you want to send me questions, it's teiserer@wfaa.com. And at some point at the end of this trial, I've got to go clean out my email because it's getting out of control. Okay, so somebody's asking, why is Lieutenant Governor Patrick, who is not a lawyer, conducting this trial? Why was this case not tried before the Texas Supreme Court? Well, this is the way the Texas Constitution lays it out. And so, but he made the right decision in getting Lana Myers to help him. And Stephanie, you know her, so
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about her.
Yes, she is longtime judge. Before she was ascended to the high court, she was a state district judge here in Dallas County. Above reproach, as I stated earlier, very much a rule follower, very thorough. We used to have a joke in the courthouse. If you had to do a plea in Lana Myers Court, that was going to be one of two things you were going to get done that morning, because she was very, very thorough. She ran her courtroom in a very orderly fashion. She had the great qualities that you think about in a judge. You knew what her positions were on certain types of cases. She followed the law, very knowledgeable about the law, and a very good steward of the law, in that she would keep up with everything, cases, amendments, changes. She was just a very, very conscientious jurist. So when I saw that she was going to be helping Lieutenant Governor Patrick, I thought, wow, that was an excellent choice, because you want somebody who is going to be able to train you well, because they're a good teacher, and like I said, they're a good steward of the law. So that was wonderful. I mean, they could not have had a better person to preside over something that is unprecedented, because I know that she probably stayed up at night studying and utilizing all the materials she had at her disposal.
Clinic. It was like a law school clinic there.
It was. He said that. He said he went to judge boot camp, which I believe. You know, she was a good drill sergeant to have, because she's a wonderful, wonderful judge. Great thing, like I said, always on time, always concise in her rulings, would make decisions, and would follow the law.
And you know what, Tanya, I think that Lieutenant Governor, who happens to be the judge / presiding officer in this case, had every intention and tried awfully hard to do a good job.
I thought he did great.
You know, I do too. And I think that was his, he wanted to come across as fair. He wanted to come across as at least doing the best he could, because he said up front, I am neither a lawyer nor a judge, but I will try to do my best. And then, as Stephanie said, he brought on someone who's very well qualified.
Yeah, and he, you know, even when it was funny because sometimes he would allow hearsay in when he shouldn't have, and sometimes vice versa. But you always felt like he genuinely was trying to do the right thing.
He sure
and
was.
so yeah,
And
I can't. I just feel like overall he did the best he could and
Yes.
did a good job.
And I think that the defense and the prosecution sort of understood it and just moved on.
Okay, so how soon will there be a book, and who will be the first to write it? Well, I don't know, but I bet there will be, and it will not be me because I don't have time to write a book. So,
I think. Well, I think they're talking about the witnesses. I would hope that
Laura
Laura Olson's going to be the one of the top of the bestseller
I
list.
don't know, but she took the fifth.
I-
Well, she didn't take the
well,
fifth.
but-
Let me rephrase that. So she I don't know.
Well, she did. She did.
Well, no,
she
did
didn't
not
take it on the stage.
Well, we don't know.
Okay, according to what the street said. But anyway, but you know what? As I said early on, you can look for a movie. Now, possibly a book prior to, you know, because the producers generally need a script. So they could go with a book, but you're going to see this in a different type of setting. And I could almost bet, if I had investment money, I would invest in a movie.
Okay.
Miniseries, docuseries.
Oh, somebody's going to write something.
Oh,
There will
yeah.
definitely be a book. Okay, so somebody's asking about Brent Webster, the current first assistant. No, he was not called. And Busby, as this person mentioned, you know, basically said, why didn't the prosecution call Brent Webster? And then, of course, the real question is, well, why didn't the defense call him? You know, because why would the prosecution have called Brent Webster? That wouldn't make any sense.
You know what? That is so true. That is so. That's just like the defense is just throwing things out there to have you question something.
Okay, we're going to do one more question, and then Jay says we should take a break. So, and then we'll go back to the Brandon Kamek. We'll go back to the Brandon Kamek cross. Or not cross, direct. Okay, so this person asked, did I hear correctly that Brandon Kamek subpoenaed Ken Paxton's prosecutors? No, he didn't. It wasn't the prosecutors. There was a whole bunch of people on this list, and there was I think there was somebody from the securities board and an investigator, and so it wasn't the prosecutors. But there was just Brandon Kamek was given a list of a bunch of people he should subpoena, and there was some people related to the securities board on it. Okay. Oh, okay. So what was the count in the House? You know what? I better go double check that before
I think it was that 120.
I'm going to go double check that
23.
because that's
Okay.
count in the House.
Isn't it
for
123?
impeachment. All right, I'm looking, guys,
23,
because
something like that.
I
It was
don't
something
remember.
like
I remember
So
that it.
like-
Okay. I'm looking. I'm pulling up. Okay, here we go. The House voted 121 to 23.
23.
That's what it was, and of course it was the overwhelming majority. So that answers that question. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back. We're going to take a break because we've been talking a lot, and I still got a lot of questions you guys have been sending me. You can keep sending them. It's actually easier if you send like shorter, because like the longer you make your email, like I'm really tired, to be honest with you, because it's been a long week, and so the shorter your email, maybe the better, because I get lost in a lot of stuff. But anyway, my email is teiserer@wfaa.com. All right, so we're going to go back to testimony from Brandon Kamek.